Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Rebecca and I usually don't post sit down long form traditional YouTube videos on this channel. I usually post vlog type stuff, video diary type content, and I love doing that. I'm not very consistent with it. It's kind of really when I just feel inspired to do that, and there hasn't been much of that lately, I won't lie to you, but I do want to share something else that I'm really passionate about, and that is books. I love reading. I've always loved reading, but I've come back around to being a consistent reader in my adult life, probably within the past year and a half or 2 years. It's really solidified its place in my life as a hobby and something that I like to spend a lot of time doing, and I'm just very passionate about it. I don't have a lot of people in my real life that read similar literature to me, so I just want to be able to talk about books that I read because I love them and I always have a great time. So today we're going to talk about probably like what I would consider my top 5 books that I've read so far this year. I originally tried to film this video talking about every single book that I've read so far this year, and it was way too long, just way too long. I talked for way too long, so hopefully this is a more simplified version of that and I don't ramble for as long. But we're going to be talking about the top 5. This isn't necessarily in order because some of these books I still haven't like fully formed a thought. I just know that I loved it. So these are in no particular order. I'm just going to talk about them however I pick them up off the floor, honestly. So I have 3 nonfiction and 2 fiction books to talk about. So 3 of these books are very, very small books, but obviously powerful enough to make it in my top 5. So let's just begin. It's also very warm in this room, so if I get progressively sweatier as the video goes on, I'm sorry about that. Not much I can do. So the first one I have on the pile here is Cockroaches by Scholastic Mukasanga. This is a book that I probably would have never found, or at least not, I wouldn't have found it as quickly as I did if it were not for a booktuber on here that I watch pretty religiously. Her name is Anna Wallace Johnson, and I love all of her book recommendations. I do try to find books on my own and kind of develop my own taste that way, but every book that I read that she recommends pretty much I end up really, really loving, and so this is one of them. And this is a memoir. It details Mukasanga surviving the genocide in 1994 in Rwanda, and she lost her entire family in that tragedy, and this is something I honestly had no idea about. This is not something I ever learned about, and not something that ever was on my radar. I'm being just like so honest about that. It was never on my radar. So this was definitely, that's why I wanted to pick it up. I wanted to learn about this, and I think memoirs are a really great way to learn about something so tragic and also so impactful. I would love to keep doing research about this and read other literature as well, but I feel like this was a great place to start. And what I love so much about this is that Mukasanga, this is the first piece I've ever read by her, but this book was obviously incredibly difficult to read. It's not easy to read about an event like that, no matter where it is, but she feels, the way she writes, it feels as if she's like a friend and she's sitting down with you and holding your hand and trusting you with her story, if that makes any sense. There's such a unique approach to the way that she tells this story, and I loved it. I originally read it on Kindle, and then I went to a Half Price Books and saw this, and I was like, I need that on my shelf. I need to have that forever. So this was lovely, and I just think her strength, obviously her determination to tell this story is extremely powerful and inspiring. One of the quotes on the back here says, "A real homage to the dead that Mukasanga loved and that she stands vigil over now. This book gives them the dignified burial that they never received," and I think that states it perfectly, and I loved this. Pick this up. It's very small. It is difficult to read, like I said, but incredibly educational, incredibly touching, and moving. And this will definitely be a reread at some point in my life. I can guarantee it already. So read this if you haven't yet. And I do want to check out her other work. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. The next book is kind of along similar lines. This is In Late Summer by Magdalena Blažević. I think is how you pronounce it. She is from Bosnia and Herzegovina, this author, and this is a fictional story about the Bosnian genocide in 1993. I think it spanned a couple of years, but this story takes place specifically in August of 1993. This story was so powerful, and it follows mainly one teenage girl. She's 14. And the story really begins with just like a tenderness of what her life is like, and you just get these little vignettes of what her life is like normally in Bosnia, and her friends, her family, her village, like just what her life is like and what she thinks about, what she dreams about, just normal life. And then slowly as the story goes on, things just start to change. And the most powerful part about this book for me was that Blažević's writing was so poetic and so beautiful that at certain times you don't even realize that you're reading about something utterly horrific, if that makes any sense. There were a couple times I had to go back and reread a passage or a page because there was a feeling when you ended the page that something was wrong, but I was so captivated by her writing. This just felt like a long poem, if that makes sense, and she doesn't have overly long sentences too. That's the other really impressive thing about this author. This is the first time I've read anything by her, and I had never heard of this book before, but her sentences are incredibly concise, but she still portrays such great feeling and such great description in such short sentences. And like, this book is not very long at all. Stunning. Another event that I have no prior knowledge of and want to learn more about, and I think this was a great, really eye-opening book, even though it's fiction. Just like Mukasanga's memoir, I do think that something told in a fictional sense like this can also be incredibly eye-opening and incredibly educational. So this was a great book. And like I said, I had never heard of this book before. I randomly picked this up in a bookstore in Dublin, Ireland when I was there about 2 months ago. I picked it up and I'm really glad I did, because this was so special and captured such memory of a life that I didn't live, if that makes sense. This book was great. I highly recommend. And not to flex, but the author liked my review on Goodreads after I posted that I loved that book. So that is The Master Margarita by Bulgakov. This is a book that I've had for a couple months now, and this honestly was so intimidating to me sitting on my shelf. I've never read a full-length Russian novel before. I've only read White Nights by Dostoevsky, which obviously is a short story novella. Very brief, very small, stunning, but it's short. So this was the first full-length Russian novel that I've completed, and I've just heard so many things about how wacky this book is and how bizarre this book is, and I thought that it would be kind of confusing to read, but this was great. And also, this is a fictional tale, obviously, but you learn so much about Russian history and Russian culture in like an everyday sense. Once again, another fiction book being highly educational, which I knew they could be, but as I'm just getting back into reading as an adult, I'm really realizing how true that is. And so this is a very whimsical, fantastical book. A great story, such a great story. I did lose a little bit of steam towards the end, I won't lie. There's a lot of characters, classic Russian lit fashion from what I understand. This is a very, very special book. I've never read anything like this, and I don't know if I will read anything like this ever again. And it's not super long. It's definitely manageable. My copy is about 300 and 80 pages, almost 400. Yeah, just under 400, and I have the 50th anniversary edition from Penguin. I initially picked this up because it's just a stunning copy. I wasn't really planning on reading it at the time, but it's a stunning copy, and the inside flap also. I believe this says on the inside flap it has it's in Russian, it's the Cyrillic alphabet, but I believe that is the "manuscripts don't burn" quote from this book that became quite popular in Russia. This book was published, I believe, after Bulgakov's death. I believe it was banned initially. When he was alive and writing this, it was banned from release, but thank God we got this book because this was great. A great story. It took me a little bit to get through, but this is a very special book and a very special... I haven't read anything else by Bulgakov, but this is a lovely, lovely book. If you're looking for a good starter Russian lit novel to read, I feel like this is a great place to start because it's entertaining. And even though there's a lot of names and there's a lot of characters and a lot going on, a lot of scene switching, a lot of location switching, it never felt confusing, it never felt overwhelming. Like when you're in a character's plot line, you're in that plot line and you don't really have to poke your head out of the sand too much. So, and it's also just entertaining. Like I was so drawn to pick up that book, which I think is super important. So The Master and Margarita is definitely a top book of the year. So the next book I'm going to talk about is Susan Sontag's Regarding the Pain of Others. This is a nonfiction book, another smaller one. The small books seem to be packing a punch, I guess, this year and seem to be impacting me the most. So don't skip on the small books. But this is a collection. This is my first Susan Sontag. This is a collection of essays, or it might just be one long essay. I'm not actually sure what it's considered, but I would say one long essay because I don't think they're titled anything different. Yeah, this is, I think, just one long essay. Basically about the impact of war photography, specifically war photography, but kind of generally media, on just the effect of seeing violent imagery or paintings even. She talks about a lot of classical art and paintings. Just kind of what effect that has on society and collective psyche and what kind of impact that can have on our empathy for other people if we're just overloaded with violent imagery or tragic imagery all the time. And also with she really wraps in there like kind of the dawn of technology. This was written in 2003, I think. So she really does touch on the fact that we aren't really meant to be seeing images every single day of things like that, of tragedies happening around the world, that's not really natural and that's not really something we're supposed to be seeing, and that can really diminish our empathy for other people and our, just honestly, how much we care about these things going on and how desensitized we can become to tragedies happening around the world. And I studied photography in school and I had to take many classes, obviously, about art history, photography history, but then we also had to take classes about the ethics of photojournalism and kind of what you're supposed to do if you end up being a photojournalist, and just a journalist in general, but specifically photojournalism, because there's a lot of tampering with photographs, a lot of staging photographs. This book would have been really great reading because it does focus on a lot of photographs. It does go over some classical paintings and kind of like the violence depicted in those, and talks about 9/11 quite a bit and kind of the really intense imagery that came out of that event in the US. And these are so memorable. Like if you just look up every image she's talking about, you've probably seen it. So this was really unexpected. I've never read anything by her, but this was super interesting to me as somebody who went to school for photography. I work in a photo studio every day, so this is definitely of interest to me, and this was a super digestible, easy read, and I think it's really just more relevant now than ever, to be honest, and I think this was great. And I definitely would like to reread this and kind of like annotate and bookmark certain things. I just wanted to do an initial read, and the last book I don't have physically, but I did check out from the library and read it physically. I didn't read it on my Kindle, but I don't have it. I would love to purchase it because I would love to have it in my collection, but I just haven't gotten around to it. And that is Empire of Pain by Patrick Radden Keefe. This book pretty much details the dawn of and the beginning of the opioid crisis in the US, and I thoroughly enjoyed this. This was a tome. This is about 800 pages, and yeah, it just details how the opioid epidemic started, but specifically with a really sharp laser focus on the Sackler family, who is responsible for inventing OxyContin, and just the horrible way that they marketed that product and sold that product and deceived millions of people, and made a lot of money off of that. And they're still going through legal processes to prosecute them to this day. Like, that's still a news story. I really do like investigative journalism. I think sometimes it's a little much. Like, sometimes I can't read those books back to back to back, but I do really like learning about a subject like that in the form of a book, if that makes sense. Sometimes when I try to research something on the internet, like, there's just so many sources that I just don't even know what to pick, and you have to like piece everything together. But something like this book, I get a lot of information in one place, and I'm not saying it's all the information because I don't know, but a lot of information. This was an 800-page book, and I know Patrick Radden Keefe is a pretty credible journalist, and so this was honestly great to read, but also devastating to read, and it angered me. I'm not gonna lie, it angered me as somebody who has lived in the US and has grown up here my entire life. Obviously you're aware of these things because you watch them on the news, or you know somebody who's affected by this, but just reading about just the blatant disregard for human life and for people genuinely suffering from an opioid addiction. And a lot of these people, it started from a genuine place of being in pain, and then they were taken advantage of and exploited for money and for profit. And that is really hard to read about and to just spend hours and hours and hours reading about, but I'm glad I did, and this was just a really great, concise as it could be, account of this tragedy that's happening in the US, and definitely is motivating me to pick up more Patrick Radden Keefe. I already have his book Say Nothing. It's on my shelf, but I haven't gotten to it yet. So that is a great piece of investigative journalism. I would love to own it. I have already recommended it to a few people. So yeah, if you just want to learn about that piece of, honestly, like American history, dark American history, then pick up that book. That is the last book on my list that I've completed, and I have some reading plans for the rest of the year as well. And yeah, if you enjoy talking about books, let me know. I would love to talk about books with you, and I would love to get some more recommendations and add them to my TBR. I probably don't need more books on my TBR, but I love books, I love reading, and it's something I would like to keep talking about. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you next time.